If you rent a home in the UK, stop scrolling right now because your rights have changed in a huge way and millions of renters still don't fully understand what's happening. From evictions to rent increases to mold repairs to pet discrimination and landlord powers, the UK rental market is being completely transformed. And depending on whether you're a renter or a landlord, these changes could either protect you or seriously worry you. So here's everything you need to know about the new renters' rights changes that's happening right now in the UK. So for years, millions of renters across the UK have complained about the same problems. People said they felt insecure in their homes, they worried about being evicted suddenly, and they complained about landlords ignoring repairs. They struggled with mold, damp, broken heating, unsafe electrics, rising rents, and feeling powerless. And many renters said they were scared to even complain because they feared being kicked out. But now the government says things are changing. So the new renters' rights reforms are now reshaping the rental market across the UK, and they're being described as some of the biggest housing changes in decades. One of the biggest changes involves something called Section 21. So now if you've rented property in the UK before, you must have probably heard about this. So Section 21 became known as a no-fault eviction, and renters feared it because under the old system, landlords could remove tenants without needing to prove the tenant had done anything wrong. So even if rent was paid on time, even if they caused no problems, even if they simply asked for repairs, they could still potentially be told to leave. And this created fear for millions of renters. Many people felt they could never truly settle down. They were worried about losing their homes unexpectedly. Families were worried about children changing schools, and workers, they were worried about suddenly having nowhere to live. And campaigners argued that the system gave tenants very little power, but now the removal of Section 21 changes everything. Landlords now need a legal ground if they want tenants to leave. So that means renters have more protection against sudden no-fault evictions. And supporters of the new reform say this gives renters more stability, more confidence, and more security in their homes. But not everybody agrees, because some landlords, they say these changes make it harder to deal with difficult situations, and they argue that removing tenants could become more complicated and take much longer time. And some property owners fear that bad tenants could take advantage of the system. So this debate has exploded online because some people, they're celebrating and others are warning that this could damage the rental market overall. And that's just the beginning, because another huge part of the reforms focus on housing conditions. Now, this is something millions of renters have experienced. People living with mold, damp walls, leaks, broken boilers, unsafe wiring, pest problems, freezing cold homes, and in some cases, renters say landlords ignored their complaints for months. And some tenants, they just felt trapped. They worried that if they complained too much, that they could lose their actual home. But now, tenants have stronger rights when it comes to, demanding repairs and safer living conditions. And landlords are under more pressure to respond properly. So this means renters have more legal protection if serious housing problems are ignored. And supporters say this is long overdue because nobody should be paying huge amounts of rent while living in unsafe or unhealthy conditions. But again, there's another side to this debate, because some landlords argue rising repair costs, higher taxes, mortgage pressure, and tighter regulations are making property ownership harder than ever. And many say landlords are being unfairly blamed, especially smaller landlords who own one or two properties. Some claim they're already struggling financially, and now they fear even more pressure. This is one of the reasons why many experts say that the rental market is entering a complete new era, because the balance of power is changing, and people across the UK are already feeling the effects. And now there's another massive change that involves discrimination against renters. So as you're aware, for years, many people complained they couldn't even get accepted for rental properties. And not because they were bad tenants, but because of who they were. Because some landlords automatically rejected tenants with children, and others rejected people that are receiving benefits. And renters described seeing adverts saying things like, no benefits, no children, professionals only. And many people have argued that this was unfair. They said hardworking families and vulnerable renters, they were being pushed aside. But now, blanket bans against renters with children or people receiving benefits are being challenged more heavily under the new reforms. And supporters say this creates a fairer rental system. They believe housing should be based on whether someone can responsibly rent a property and not based on stereotypes. But critics argue landlords should still have the freedom to choose who lives in the property. But again, the debate, it continues. And now let's talk about one of the most talked changes online. Pets. Yep, pets. Because for years, as you're aware, renters across the UK struggled to find homes that allowed animals, people with dogs, cats, even small pets. They constantly faced rejections wherever they applied for, and some renters said they had to secretly hide pets, and others gave animals away because they couldn't find housing, and many felt frustrated because they considered pets part of their family. But now, renters have stronger rights when requesting permission for pets. Landlords can still refuse in certain situations, but they now face more pressure to provide proper reasons, and this has become hugely popular among animal lovers. And social media has exploded when people heard about these changes because for many renters, this isn't just about rules anymore, it's emotional. People love their pets and they want stable homes where their families, including animals, are accepted. But landlords have concerns too, because some worry about property damage and others fear noise complaints or even the cleaning costs. And some say insurance issues make things more complicated. So once again, the issue has divided opinions. And now another huge topic is rent increase. And this affects almost everybody renting in the UK because over the last few years, rental prices have skyrocketed, and in some areas, rent increased so much that people could barely keep up. Tenants described feeling trapped, and I don't blame them. They worked full-time jobs, but they still struggled to afford housing. And many people blamed a shortage of homes, rising demand, and economic pressure. But under the new law, rent increases face tighter rules and clearer legal processes. And supporters say this stops unfair sudden increases. They believe renters deserve more predictability, more transparency, and more time to prepare financially. But landlords argue rising costs, they're real. They point to higher mortgage payments, maintenance costs, insurance, tax changes, and inflation. And many landlords say they have to increase rents just to survive financially. So now the big question is, will these reforms actually make renting more affordable in the UK? Or could they make the housing shortage worse? Because this is where this debate becomes even bigger. Because some experts warn that landlords may start leaving the market. And if more landlords sell their properties, that actually could reduce the number of rental homes that are currently available. And when supply drops, as you're aware, prices can increase. So critics fear these reforms could accidentally push rents even higher in the long run. But supporters are strongly disagreeing. They say renters have suffered for many years. They argue housing should not feel unstable or unfair. And they believe stronger protection is necessary. So right now, the entire country is debating a huge question. How do you balance tenant protection with keeping landlords in the market? And there's another issue people are talking about. Student renters. Millions of students rent properties across the UK, and many students have complained about poor housing conditions for many years. Some described mould, leaks, broken appliances, unsafe conditions, and overcrowded housing. So many students are now paying close attention to these reforms too, because these changes could affect how student housing operates moving forward. And now let's talk about something else people are noticing. Landlord checks and regulations are increasing. So many local council housing authorities are becoming stricter about standards, and landlords who ignore safety responsibilities may face more consequences. And this includes areas like gas safety, electrical safety, property maintenance, and tenant treatment. And while supporters say this improves housing quality, some landlords feel very overwhelmed. They argue paperwork, regulation, and costs are increasing constantly, and this pressure is causing frustration across the property industry. Now, another reason this topic is exploding online is because housing affects almost everybody. If you rent, these reforms affect you. If you're a landlord, they affect you. If you're trying to move out for the first time, they affect you. If you're a parent helping your children rent, they affect you. Housing is one of the biggest issues in the UK right now because people are spending huge portions of their income just trying to keep a roof over their head. And many young people say owning a home, it just feels impossible. So renting has become the long-term reality for millions of people, and that's why these reforms are such a huge deal for them, because they directly impact everyday life. And now let's talk about the emotional side of this, because housing isn't just business, it's personal. It's where families live, it's where people sleep, it's where children they grow up. And for years, many renters they felt powerless. Some people were scared to ask for repairs, and others feared, rent increases, and some worried every year about whether they had to move again. And moving, that's not cheap. The deposits, agency fees, transport costs, getting new furniture, time off work, stress. So supporters of the reform say greater stability can improve people's mental well-being too. But they argue that secure housing changes lives. But landlords also have emotional frustrations. Some say they've had terrible experience with tenants, and others describe unpaid rent, their property getting damaged, legal battles, and months of stress trying to recover losses. So this issue is complicated. It's not simply good versus bad. They're responsible renters and they're also bad renters. They're responsible landlords as well, and they're also bad landlords. And now the government is trying to reshape the whole system. But whether it works in long term, that's what everyone is watching closely. And now, another major concern people have is enforcement, because having laws is one thing, but enforcing them properly, that's another thing. Because some renters worry that even with stronger rights, they will still struggle to challenge landlords. They feel legal processes may still feel intimidating, they worry complaints could take too long, and some are asking whether councils and authorities have enough resources to properly handle housing disputes. And meanwhile, landlords worry about being unfairly targeted. They fear false complaints, long legal battles, and losing control over their properties. So even though these reforms are huge, the real test is how they work in reality. Now let's talk about social media, because the internet has gone crazy of the renter changes. Because some videos online are celebrating because people are saying, finally, renters have rights and it's about time. This should have happened years and years ago. But others are furious. Some landlords are posting videos saying they're selling their properties, and others warn the UK rental market could shrink. And some people are even predicting higher rents and fewer available homes. So no matter where you stand, one thing is clear, that these reforms are changing the conversation around housing in Britain. And another important issue is transparency. Many renters previously felt confused about their rights. They didn't know what landlords legally could do and couldn't do. And some tenants admitted that they avoided confrontation because they feared losing their home. But now awareness around renters' right is growing fast. People are educating themselves more. They're researching the tenancy rights, repair rights, the eviction rules and legal protection. And that knowledge itself changes the balance of power, because informed renters are harder to exploit. Now let's discuss how these changes affect younger generations. Many young adults are renting longer than previous generations. House prices have increased massively, economic pressures and cost of living increases have delayed home ownership for millions of people. So these reforms particularly matter to younger people, because renting isn't temporary for many people anymore. It's the long-term reality, and that means stability becomes even more important. Now, another topic causing debates is fixed-term tenancies. Some people liked fixed contracts because it gave them certainty, but others felt trapped, and reforms changing the tenancy structure are now affecting how contracts actually work. Again, supporters say flexibility helps tenants, and critics say uncertainty could hurt landlords. So almost every part of the rental system is now under discussion. Now here's something else important. Not all landlords are huge property investors. Many are ordinary people with one extra property. Some inherited homes, some invested years ago for retirement income, and many small landlords say they feel trapped. They argue they provide housing people need, and they fear being pushed out. This is why the debate is becoming emotional on both sides, because renters feel they need protection, but landlords feel increasing pressure too. And experts warn that if either side collapses, the housing market suffers. Now, another major issue is trust. For many years, many renters didn't trust their landlords, and many landlords didn't trust their tenants. These reforms are partly trying to rebuild confidence in the system, but whether that happens, we still don't know. So now let's talk about the wider housing crisis, because these renters reforms are happening during one of the toughest housing periods the UK has faced in years. House prices remain high, renter demand is huge, living costs are rising, and many people feel financially squeezed. So these reforms are not happening in isolation, they're part of much of a bigger national problem, and people are desperate for solutions. Now, another issue people are discussing is court systems, because if landlords need legal grounds for evictions, some are worried courts could become overloaded. They fear long waiting times, and landlords say delays could create serious financial problems for them. Meanwhile, tenant groups argue that stronger protections are worth it. So once again, opinion is divided, and this is why housing has become one of the most political, powerful topics in the country, because almost everybody has a housing story. People struggling with rent, people dealing with, repairs, landlords dealing with costs with bad tenants, families unable to move, young adults unable to buy homes, and all these frustrations are colliding at the same time. And now, here's something many renters are now being told. Know your rights, because many tenants still don't fully understand the protection is available to them. And experts, they say education is becoming more important than ever. Understanding contracts, understanding, your notice periods, understanding repairs, and understanding legal processes, because knowledge gives people confidence. So now let's talk about how this could affect, the future, because some experts believe the rental market will become more professional. They predict stronger standards, better management, and more accountability. But others fear there'll be fewer landlords and potentially even higher rents. So right now, nobody fully agrees on what the long-term outcome is going to be. But everybody agrees on one thing. The UK rental market is changing dramatically, and these reforms are only part of much of a bigger housing debate that is continuing across the country. So whether you're renting, looking to rent, or renting out your property, these changes matter because the relationship between landlords and tenants is entering a complete new phase, and millions of people are now trying to understand exactly what that means for them, because some renters, they feel relieved, and some landlords, they feel nervous. Some experts, they feel hopeful, and others, they feel worried. But no matter what side people are on, the conversation around housing in the UK may never be the same again. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think these new renters' rights finally bring fairness to the UK housing market? Or could these changes actually make the housing crisis even worse? Comment below with your opinion, and make sure you follow for more breaking UK news, politics, and major updates happening right now.